Hello, my name is Barbara Cooper and I have several flower shops in the south of England. This is going to be the third in a series of videotapes that we're doing. We hope that it's going to be a good challenge for you and that you're really going to enjoy doing some of these Christmas arrangements. I hope I've been able to give you a variety so that you can choose the ones that you want to do. Now I know it's a very busy time for people at Christmas and I suggest that you try doing them about a week beforehand. Now you will have to actually ask the florist for flowers because they get very busy, and if you haven't ordered the right things you might find that you're unlucky when you go to the shop. What I suggest you do is you run through the tape, and if you want to do something you can rewind and stop and start as you need to, and I think you'll find there's a nice run of things for you to try. So be brave, have a go and really enjoy doing it, because if you enjoy doing the things then it comes out in the flowers themselves and they'll look really good. And lots of people will be very pleased to see them, and a good presents and all sorts of things you can do for Christmas. So have a go and really enjoy doing them, and I'll see you again at the end of the tape. For Christmas, the usual things that one sees are the Christmas wreaths, so I'd like to start off this tape by showing you how to make the Christmas wreath. This can either be used for outdoors on the graveyard or in a cemetery, or it can be hung from a door, or you can use it as a table centre. There are two different types of wreath frames that you can get. This is the old-fashioned way of doing it, which is on a moss base. This one I've already mossed. I'm going to show you how to do it in a minute. And this is the metal frame that it went onto. The modern version is the Oasis wreath frame, which takes the wet sponge, and also it lasts a lot longer because it's heavier. It doesn't tend to blow off if you've got it outside in the cemetery. Right, what you're going to need is some moss. Now you can either go to your local florist or garden centre to buy some moss, but this is moss I've actually raked off the lawn. We happen to have got a very mossy lawn because it's fairly damp round here, so all I've gone and done is to gone out with a big rake and rake some out. It does the lawn good anyway. So you'll need the metal wreath frame for this and a roll of reel wire, because you're going to need that to attach it to the moss and the frame. So we start off by attaching the wire to the frame itself. Just bend it round a few times so that it holds. And then you're going to take the moss and you start using it as though you're a bath sponge. You put it into a group and push it together, and that group goes on to the frame. You take your reel wire and you just bind it on. Another piece and it slots on, push it together so it joins onto the bit you've just done, and you go round it again, pulling it fairly tight, not tight enough to break the wire. You need quite a good bit because you're going to need it to hold the wired holly bits right the way through. You continue on all the way around, pushing it on and making it nice and plump. Try and keep it even as you go, otherwise you'll have a wreath that sticks up at one end if you're not careful. So you carry on all the way round, and then when you get to the end you cast off by binding it round just a couple of times onto your metal frame and cutting it off. This is the one I've just finished, and there are two ways of doing your holly wreath. The modern way and the easiest way is, while you've got your reel wire, is you start it off again by binding the actual foliage onto it now. So you loop it on so it's tight to start off with. This is Leylandii, which is a good base, and obviously the holly you're going to need. So you'll need quite a lot of holly. This one's only got a small prickle on it, which is jolly helpful because you'll end up with really sore hands if you're not careful. And you don't need it as long as that, so you cut it in between the joints, so you get, say, two pieces, and you put them together, and you put your Leylandii on underneath, and you put this on the top, And then you get your wire and you just catch it onto it like that, all the way along. And your next bit comes on, and then your next bit of Leylandii. Put the Leylandii on first. Then the next bit of holly. All the way around. You can make it as thick as you want to, or as thin as you want to. It's giving it a neat pull as you go. If you want to add any other foliage, then you add that as you go along as well. The only thing with this method is that they all tend to be lying in a circle fairly flat. This is a bit of yew, which is nice for a bit of a change. So just carry on going around. If you want to add a bit of variegated, then again, you cut that in half, put the two together and add it in. All the way round, so you'll end up with a nice round ring of the ones lying nice and flat like that. If you want it for a door, then you want to put a ribbon on the top to hang it from. So you need to get some red ribbon, or tartan ribbon is quite nice, and decide how long you want your handle. You cut it off like that, just group it together at the bottom, and you take a stub wire, which is one which hasn't had the green coating on, because you're not going to expect it to last outside all year. So you make it nice and tight and it's not going to fall off. You take it and push it through the top side of your wreath frame, double it back just so that it loops itself back round the handle so that it's not going to fall out round the top, so that you can hold it and hang it. Let's cut this off here. And the other one, which I'm going to finish for you, this one you just carry on as you would do, similar to that all the way around. But this is the Oasis wreath frame, which I've just greened up the same. Now with the Oasis one, because it's already wet, you don't need to bind it, because the actual pieces of foliage will just push in, so you only need to cut it. Take off the bottom leaf so you can got a space to put it into the Oasis. And you just push it in at an angle all the way around. And if you want to add any other different types of foliage, this is very good because it's the variegated laurel and it gives a nice variety of colour. If you want to hang this one, you'll have to bind it before you get to the top end by pulling the ribbon through it, because obviously you can't push your way through the metal base at the bottom, and then tie it so that you can bring the handle back up to the top. That bit will get hidden at the back, and you've got that to use as your handle. And if you want to, you can make ribbons to go into those. This is the nice tartan ribbon. I can find the right end. And to make ribbon bows, you need your wires, and you're going to loop the ribbon into little loops like this, bringing them together into your thumb and your forefinger together and squashing them up so they're not dead level. And you can do groups of 3 or 4 or 5, depending on how many you want. And then you twist it by holding the wire down your fingers, and you bind it around the top, catching all the bits of the ribbon at the bottom. Just another one at the back. And then you have your flowery loop of ribbon, which you can push into your wreath like that. Just show you again. Loop and push, loop and push, loop and push, loop and push, loop and push. Cut it off. I generally move mine slightly, so I've moved my fingers, and then you push that into the back. Bring it round the top of your finger so it catches all the bows that you're holding at the bottom, so you have a nice neat base to it. Bring it round once or twice, and then you have your next one to put in. All right, the other thing that obviously is needed in the wreath frame is the holly berries. Now the thing with the holly berries is that they always come on a spray and they're jolly difficult to see. They always seem to hide themselves down the bottom so that you can't really see them in the arrangements and things. So you need to cut them off at the top like that and just add the top bits to the frame so that they actually show properly. Now the only thing with those is that if you're going to put it outside, the birds eat them. So we have the false berries, which you buy a bundle of. Always manage to get themselves hooked into just about everything. And you take 2 or 3 of these. There's a berry on the end of each of these wires. Now you can use them by just twisting them round a branch if you want to, or again you take your berries and bend them and make a loop like a hairpin, and then you bind them around with your wire so that they're on a stem like that, and then you can move your berries around, and then you can push those into the oasis so they look as though they're growing in with the holly as it should be, depending on how many you want to do. Maybe you want to do 4. So again, you bend them so they're not all in a line. Take your wire, bend it back so it's like a hairpin, and loop it round at the top so they're all held nice and tightly, and you can spread them out however you want to do them and pop them in. Now the variegated holly is very good for this. I'm just doing it by pushing it into the wreath. You want to go the same direction all the time, otherwise the things won't lay straight in there. Another bit of laurel. You can use any kind of variegated or evergreen foliage in the wreaths, and you can also use cones. They're nice to use, and you can collect those in the autumn. And you can pop those in. Now to wire a cone, you're going to need some green wire so they don't rust, because you can use these again in arrangements later on. So these are ones that I've already wired, and I'll just show you how to wire them. If I unravel them, you'll have your cone that you've picked up from outside like this. It'll probably be really tight when you pick it up, but as it gets into the warm atmosphere of your house, they'll open up like this. So you'll take your wire and you're going to push it between the leaves at the bottom of the cone, as tight to the bottom as you can get, where they start to open. And you bring it round like a horseshoe again and just catch it. And if you hold it there with this hand and twist the cone round, it'll make a nice tight loop at the top, which is holding your cone in. And you can vary the length on them so that when you come to make a run of them, like a spray, you can make them all different sizes, starting off with the big one at the bottom and the smaller ones at the end. If you wanted to actually use some glitter and some tinsel and all those kind of things in your arrangements, you can do the same thing with your cones, spray them, and then you do, as we did before, take your wires down behind the back, bring it round in between all the little floret bits, hold it tight and twist the cone round, and then you'll have a nice silvered cone. And you can put glue on the end of the cones and just tip some glitter on, and you'll have a nice glittery cone with a silver base. Add them together or use them singly. Just going to cut these up and pop them into here. If you use 5 or 4, it goes round the wreath in a nice way so that you've got them evenly spaced around. And you can just use your foliage. Let's do another bow to put in here. Now, a lot of people want to celebrate the month of Christmas, so you're going to need an Advent wreath. The Advent wreath has its candles lit on the first, second, third and fourth Sunday, and one for, well, the fourth Sunday is the one for Christmas Day. And to do that, if you want to add your candles to a wreath like that, that's quite good as a door wreath, which you can hang up on your door. Now, if you want to make it into an Advent wreath, you want to, let's take this off here, you want to add your candles, 4 candles. And you will need 4 candle holders. Now, these push into the oasis or into the moss to hold your candles. But you will have to remember that you want to usually suspend it. If you're going to use it as a table one, then that's fine. But if you want to actually hang it from a hook in the ceiling or from the wall, you're going to need to make sure you've put your 4 sets or 3 sets of ribbons round it to hold it by. Otherwise you'll not be able to hang it up and you'll have all your bits in the way. So you want to put those on the 4 times like we did with the other hanging door bit. Then with these you just put them in between the foliage, and you want to take a piece of this which is a fix, because sometimes the candles don't actually fit properly into the top of the candle holder and they wobble about, so you can just push those in on top of the fix so it holds it nice and firmly. So you want 4 of these. 1, 2, 3. Don't forget that if you have a lot of foliage underneath it, you don't want to leave it lit for too long so that it catches the foliage and sets fire to it. So you don't want anything that's artificial actually around where the candle's going to be lit. So you can have your 4 candles, and you need to make sure obviously that the streamers that you're going to use to tie it with are not actually going to be right where you put your candles, and you need to get them all level. With the moss frame you can push it through with a wire, but you need 4 of these or 3 of these depending on how easy, and you'll suspend it from the middle so that you've got a nice one. Now in the background here we've got an Advent wreath already done. If you like to come across here, this one is made out of different textured bases. We've got little parcels, we've got our 4 candles, we've got little leaves and cones and some dried holly bits. This one will last from year to year. We've got hazelnuts, and this is actually standing on a lamp holder, lamp standard, so you can use it if you've got one in your own home. You haven't got to make a base for it. Now there's some bits that need doing on it. So because this is a dried one, I've actually glue gunned the pieces to it. It's very important. This is a glue gun which is very useful. The hot glue, it's melted through here and the hot glue comes out at the end. You have to be very careful if there are children in the house, because if you're not careful they'll get very severely burnt, including you if you're not careful. So what we need to do is we take our cone and we put a good dollop of glue. You can see it coming out onto the base. And because this is a dried Advent wreath, we can just pop it onto the base quite nicely. And a little hazelnut. Just mind you don't get the glue onto your fingers. Now the parcels are off some picks that you can buy. We sell them as a unit. There's 2 or 3 little parcels and a bit of greenery at the top, which I'll show you later on. So we've just taken the parcels off and you just put the glue again on the bottom and pop it on. You could use it on fresh one if you wanted to, like that. I've put a bow at the top which hides where the actual light fitting is, so that you can use that all, for 2 or 3 weeks before Christmas as well. So this won't hurt because it's dried. You haven't got to water it or spray it or anything, and you can use it from year to year. The only thing with the candles, you have to be careful. If you're going to light the candles, only light them for a very, very short time, because obviously being dried, it'd set fire very easily. You can buy sprays of flame resistant stuff that you can spray on, but really this is for looking at, so you have to be very careful about lighting any candles there. Now to go back to the wreath that we'd already started with the moss, the other way to do this moss frame is to actually put your leaves onto a double-legged wire. This is the old-fashioned way of doing it, as opposed to binding it on with the other wire. So what you need to do is to cut your pieces of holly as we've done before. Take this bit of variegated, for instance, and put them together the right way round so that it's going to look better when it's seen. You cut them off level at the bottom, and for each of the pieces of foliage you want to put in, you double leg it by pulling this stub wire down, looping over the top and catching the whole stem all the way down. Try not to bend too much at the bottom here, because otherwise it's difficult to push through the moss. So you need to do these with all the bits that you're actually going to put through. This is another piece of the holly with the berries. So you take out the top, turn around at the bottom, add the bit you've just cut off at the top together, and put your wire round, pull it down and catch the 2 pieces firmly together. I'm not going to keep on showing you because you'll be able to stop the video and have a look yourselves. And the same thing goes for the leilandi. You have to put the wires onto this. If you want an edge of it, you might not want an edge, you might just want to do it all in holly. But for any foliage you want to put in, then you have to wire it up in this manner. 2 bits together, cut them level and just wire it round. So when you've got a collection of pieces already, then you just push them into the moss at an angle, because it'll bend where you want it to go to, and then you bring it round at the back and just push it back into the bottom of the moss itself. Just put these 2 pieces in, push it right in, right the way through, so that the pieces of stem are actually into the moss base, which you're going to get nice and wet in a minute. Don't wet it before you start, otherwise you're going to get everything soaking wet. these are the bits of holly we've just done. Again, push it through and bend them over at the back so you get a nice neat stitching really at the back. This is how all the wreaths used to be made, whether it be Christmas or any. Usually we use the variegated as a run in the middle or in groups of 4 or 5, depending on how big your frame is. I'll just show you the back. So you push it through and you'll see the wires coming through at the back. As you pull it through, you push them back into the moss like that so they're held secure, and you can really hold the whole thing up by what you've just put in. So you have a nice neat back with no wires to poke in your fingers when you move it. And you can also bend the foliage where you want them to go. So you carry on all the way around. Using up the holly. Turning it round because I've already started at this end. Right. So you'll end up with a wreath with the flowers and the holly going all the way around nicely. Now if you wanted to, you could put your fresh flowers into there, but you'd have to double leg those as well. But nowadays we tend to put the plastic flowers. This is to represent a Christmas rose, and it's very good, it's very realistic. So you can just push this in to the moss like this at intervals all the way around. And again, you push it over. I'm pushing it over with my left hand at the back so that I'm pushing the stem, which is too long, back into itself at the bottom. Right. And the berries that we had for the other wreath, again, you can add those as you go. Don't forget that the birds are quite likely to have the ones outside if it's out there for any length of time. Right, I'll just finish this off.
Okay.
Right, I've just got back to the end of here, and you can see I've gone round with my Christmas roses and my bits of foliage, my variegated holly up to the top. This is going to be the hanging point. And I'm going to take the stripping ribbon and strip it down into 2 and make the bows as I had done with a tartan one. And these go where my candles went in the Advent wreath. Round, just to catch it at the bottom, and you can then push it through nicely. So 1. I mean, you can do these wreaths with as many things in as you like, or as little as you like. If you like a nice plain wreath, then there's no need to put all these pieces in. If you would like a really Christmassy one, and you want all the baubles and the bits with it, then obviously you're going to want cones and ribbons, and you can use all sorts of different plasticky bits in with these. I think the Christmas roses myself are the nicest of the plasticky flowers because they actually look like a Christmas rose should look, which in itself looks plasticky. Unless you're lucky enough to be actually growing them, because they are quite difficult to grow. Don't forget to tuck it in at the back. And when you've finished it, you need to take it to the sink or outside with a watering can and give it a really good soaking. The only thing you have to watch is don't hang it on a wooden door straight away, because otherwise you're going to get it leaving a big wet mark on your door. And if it's a modern house, you might not be too popular. But outside, if it's going out on a cemetery as in a grave, then you actually do need to keep it well watered. And if you want to be really over the top, you could put a nice little Father Christmas in there if you wanted to, or all sorts of little bits, which we'll show you later on. If you don't want to have it outside at all and you'd rather use this wreath base, which is on the Oasis, as a table centre, then you can do your basic circle with your outside green leaves, your holly and your variegated laurel. And then you could add these Christmas picks. These are the bits that we took apart for the Advent wreath, a little parcel, a fake cone and a piece of apple or something. And these are already on a stick here, and you can actually push these into your indoor wreath, and it makes it look very festive. So you need 4 of these for your 4 different points, like that, which is quite nice on its own. And you can add your berries as well into the corners here. The thing with the Oasis frame is that obviously you haven't got to wire everything up for it, and you can push the pieces in as and where you want them to go. Right, there are some nice berries here. This isn't holly, it's Pernetia, which has a nice ruby coloured berry, and it gives a nice change from your holly. Now, one word about holly. If you are growing a holly bush, then you need both the male and the female trees to be within a certain area of each other, otherwise you won't be getting any berries. So if you've got a holly tree that isn't giving you any berries, then the chances are that you've got either the male or female on their own. You can get the variegated ones, which are nice with the berries, but both holly trees types are very slow growing, so you need to plant them a long time in advance if you're actually wanting to get the holly from them. Also, the berries, you can guarantee you're always going to be short at Christmas time when the birds have started taking them. They tend to leave the holly almost until last, and then they'll all swoop on the one bush, and the holly tree you've got marked out for your holly berries ends up by having none at all when you actually come to pick them. So I should keep an eye on the weather, and if it looks like it's getting very cold, then I should advise you getting the holly in. Don't bring it indoors, leave it outside in a piece of the garden where you're not going to be sitting on it or standing on it or getting it disturbed, and leave it outside totally on its own with no cover over it, and that way it'll keep nice and fresh for months. You can add your own fresh flowers to this. Either take these out if you don't want the plasticky ones and substitute these for the carnations. This is a clove carnation, which is the nice ruby coloured one, and you can push these into your Oasis all the way around instead of your other Christmassy bits, so it keeps it nice and plain. And some nice spray carnations to go in with it as well. These are the scarlet colour, the proper Christmas colour. Or you could add lilies if you wanted to. The orange lily looks very nice. And the yellow, if you want something nice and bright, if you're having a team which has got yellow in it for your Christmas theme. So, and if you wanted to, you could add your Father Christmas for the children at the top. And you could put a big thick candle in the middle if you wanted to. There's a big space in the middle of here. So if you've got a nice thick candle, you could bring the candle up through the middle on its holder. Don't forget to spray everything. It's very important to keep all your foliage moist, because it soon dries out. You know, in the winter, when it's brought into a hot room, the foliage very quickly dries out. So you need a good spray gun and keep spraying it, and it will keep nice and moist and last several weeks indoors. This is going to be the large topiary tree. You could make the miniature version with a small flower pot and a cane or a small type of branch to go into it. We've got this big one here which we call the Bécassine tree, and it's done into a cement base which we've cemented in here, and you can actually pick it up, it's quite heavy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to put the oasis onto it and to do the one at the bottom. The bottom one is going to fit into a little saucer like this, which sits direct onto the concrete, and you'll put a little bit of oasis into here, surrounded with a bit of green tape on it so it doesn't fall out. Just onto your dish. I'm afraid this is a bit of oasis I've actually used, but you could actually use up pieces of oasis that we've used, because I'm only going to stick foliage into here, so it won't hurt. And of course put the water in the dish before we start. I'm going to lift this onto the floor so you can see the top bit. Oh. Right, this is the top piece here. Ignore this top because we use this for dried ones. And you're going to take a block of oasis and cut a rectangular or a squarish block like that. If you've got an oasis ball, then that'll do just as well, but you want one of the big ones, and you're going to put it centralise it into the middle of there and push it down onto the top so it's nice and firm. Because you've soaked it, you're going to get wetted because it obviously runs down as you push it on, and because obviously that's not going to be very firm once you start putting your foliage in, you want to make sure that you bind the tape underneath. Now you could use chicken net if you wanted to, but I found that this really is just as good, and you don't get your fingers spiked on the chicken netting. You bind it round, bring it round as though it's a bandage really, round the pole, up, over the top, round, so you're binding the oasis onto the top of your tree. And you want to do that quite a number of times. This is a square block. If you wanted to make it into a round, you could take your corners off before you start taping like this. So you get it to a round to start off with. Just carve off the corners. And then you just start putting your foliage in. All you need to do is to push the foliage up into the base. These are going to be the bottom bits. If you look at this one that I've already got started, you can see how I've been started off with the Elandii coming up here. You just carry on putting your foliage in as you go. Get the bottom bits done first, pushing it right up. Then you can start coming out with your side shoots all the way around, filling in with your holly. Don't need it wired for this, so you can just push it straight in like this. Some nice bits of ivy. This is rhododendron. We've even got its flower spike on there. This should last for months. If you can keep it damp, all you need to do is to put a drop of water on the oasis from time to time. It will take quite a lot because these are going to, because they're big leaves, they're going to drink quite a lot of water. And you literally carry on so that you get your arrangement circular. Like this one is here. This one I've just finished. I've been putting the ivy in. These are the flower heads of the ivy which I've pushed in. So you've got a nice round dome at the top. Now at the bottom, if I lift this up onto here, that's it, put my little pot at the bottom. What I want to do is just to make an arrangement, because this is all right as it is, but you've got quite a long pole here, and if you've got a lot of visitors and things, it's nice to make a feature of your pot. So if you take some nice bits of long foliage, a piece for the back, and push it in like that, and then some bits here, just to make a little arrangement at the front so that it'll hang down over the side of the pot like this. Use some nice variegated foliage if you want to. A little bit of hollyberry. Now I've done this mainly green because I think it looks nice just with the greenery. But if you wanted to, you could add your flowers, your spray carnations, to your one at the top and to the one at the bottom if you want to bring it round so that it's a nice group. So you could add your spray carnations to this one, say, as you've got a nice grouping at the top. Just a bit of colour for your Christmas. This is a nice one for any time of the year, really. It'll look nice, especially in a big fireplace or in the corner of a room. And it doesn't take many minutes to do, and it doesn't take many flowers either. So if you've got a reasonably large garden with a lot of foliage and not many flowers, then this is an ideal type of one to use. It's also, you can keep it out of the way of the children from being knocked off a table or a sideboard by clumsy hands. It's up to you if you want to add any flowers to the top one. If I just lower it down, I don't think you can see it all in one go, so if I put it down slowly, you can see the effect of the pot, the base, and the tree at the top. If you don't want to add any flowers, then you could just add a few little bows, just to give you a bit of colour if you want to. Like that. Oops. If you want to make a streamer, then you take your ribbon, cut it off short, and this ribbon strips into lots of little bits. You can strip it any width you like. That one's a bit wide. Usually we do them into fours, and you take a thinner wire, a silver one or a green one. The green one's slightly thicker, and you bring them down, twist it over so it catches the ends in a little group, nice and neat, so all the wires running neatly down there. And then you take your scissors or a knife and you run between the finger and the scissor along the piece of ribbon, and it goes curly. Now if you over curl, because if you pull it very tight as you do it, it'll go very curly, which you don't always want. So what you do is that you need to pull it out the opposite direction. So that's gone to, so all you do is to pull it the other way and it'll go straight. And then you can just push it into the arrangement to make a nice little streamer, all from the bottom so that it hangs down. Just show you how to do that once again. Strip the ribbon down, put them together at the end, pick up your wire and hold it like a hairpin coming in this direction, and then just catch it with the longer of the two pieces, so it's nice and neat here, and it's tight so you can't pull it out. You can bend it round wherever you want it to come out. There you go, one topiary tree or Bécassine tree. For looping, it's nice to have long strands of foliage. This is the ivy. It's one of the traditional looping strands that you can get. It's nice because it's Christmas, and ivy is a traditional one to use at Christmas. Or you could use yew. A yew is another one of the old type of foliages that we used to use. The modern one now is ruscus because it lasts a very long time, but you will have to get this from a florist because you really couldn't grow this in the garden. It comes from Holland. So we're going to show you how to put it together so that you can loop in front of your fireplace or around the front of your table. You're going to need some long strands. So we've gone off and found this that was hanging over the wall. You could buy this. Sometimes florists will sell you a long strand of ivy if they've actually ordered it in for you. So you're going to take a couple of strands and you're going to have to wire them together. And to use this, you need your green reel wire so that it doesn't show. So start off at the end by just binding the two strands together, like this. Then you get halfway down and you start off your next one into the middle of here. This is just going to be the plain ivy one. As I said, you could add other foliages if you want to. Now I tend to just bind this on at one place where I join it. If you wanted to, you could actually take the reel wire and go in between the leaves. So you start it off. So in other words, you're looping all the way down, so it's bound by a wire. Another way of doing it is to use, say, some tights that you've put Oasis into, and then you can bend the tights round as you go. But the only problem with that is that if you're not careful, you have a problem getting the stems through the tights themselves. You'd have to make a little nick every time you wanted to put anything in. So as you go, it's getting longer and longer, and you're adding the ivy as you go. Keep it going, if you can, in the same direction. If you get a stem that sticks up, then cut them off so that they don't stick out when you go to hang it onto the mantel shelf. You can cut the odd bits off when you see where they hang, once you've got it in situ. You could use all sorts of foliage. You could use pine if you wanted to, branches of pine tied together, or your Christmas tree branches. If you bought a Christmas tree that has too many branches at the bottom, then just tie them together with a piece of wire and hang those in front of the fireplace. They look quite effective. Don't forget to spray them because they're not going to have any water in the pot to hold them, to keep them nice and damp. So you need to spray all these things night and morning at least. Right, so you end up with a long trail of ivy like that. Right, if you wanted to do the ruscus, which is probably a lot easier for you, and it's certainly easier for you to get hold of probably, is that you take your strand of ruscus, take off the bottom end because you don't want that to show, and you start off at the joints onto that one there. So you're going to take some wire off and twist it in between the leaves so it's bound the end of that one to the beginning of the next one. And if you actually want to bend it into a definite shape, then you'll need to bind it all the way along in between each of the branchlets. Again, cut off the very thick end and joined the next to the next. You'll probably find 4 of these goes almost the length of your fireplace. This has a nice useful thing that it doesn't actually drop like the Christmas tree pines will, and the ivy itself will almost dry. So we're going to put that onto the mantelpiece behind us. You're going to need some sellotape or some means of attaching it. If you can bang a nail in, so well and good, or you've got a hook at each end. If you haven't, then you're going to need some blue tack or some sellotape that's going to be strong enough to hold it up. This is really just the simple looping. As you can see, we started at one end, brought it up to the middle, and it's at the far end of the mantel shelf. If you just wanted to add anything else to it, then you could add, say, the silver baubles or the little plastic bells. These come in silver and gold, and you can hang them all the way along if you wanted to, or if you wanted to keep it natural, you could add your cones wired the same as we did for the wreaths, and those you just put into groups and add them as you go along. And if you wanted to make it thicker, then you could either add a lot more ivy, or you'd add or use your ruscus into the same places. It'd look a lot thicker with that. This is another idea. You could actually hang these little wooden ornaments and little balls either from your mantel shelf or from your Bekasine tree or from your Christmas tree, of course. These will loop along as well. This is the Christmas bonbonniere with your Father Christmas. These hang from the Christmas tree or again from your ornaments along the top of your mantel shelf. This one we've made with the Father Christmas, and it's got little children's sweets in the centre of it. We're going to show you how to do those later on. There's a whole range of those for you to make for yourself for Christmas. This is going to be a hanging pomander. So what you're going to need is a spherical ball like this of Oasis, the wet type, because you can get wet and dried in this size. And you're going to need a piece of ribbon, whatever type you like, to make your handle, which you're going to cut off as we did for the wreath frame, like this. Get it to level at the bottom, screw it up so it makes a nice tight piece at the bottom. And you take the long wire with a very short end at this end, you catch it very firmly at the bottom 3 or 4 times so that you've got a good strong handle there. Then you take your ball and you push it through the centre point, straight through so it comes straight out at the bottom, hopefully near the centre. And you carry on pushing till the top of the ribbon is deep into the ball. Then you turn the ball upside down, and you want a twig or a piece of cane or a piece of stick of some sort to actually put across the bottom. If you don't put that there, when you actually hang it with the weight of the flowers and the foliage in it, then you'll find it will pull straight through and you'll end up with a heap on the floor. So what you need to do is to push the wire back up through the centre till it comes out at the top. It comes, and you pull it tight at the bottom like that. And you twist it 2 or 3 times around the original bit of ribbon at the bottom. So you have a handle with a ball well firmly stuck on the end. And then, as with the other things, you, like the Bécassine tree, you go around with your foliage. Because this is a greenery one and you're not doing a wedding one, it doesn't matter, you can actually put it down, it's not going to hurt. If you actually wanted to do a wedding one for a bridesmaid, you'd find it a bit more difficult because obviously the flowers would break at the bottom. But you literally go all around the ball. You have to make it so it's spherical, otherwise if you get bits that stick out too much, it's going to look a bit silly when it's hung up. So you want to take as many pieces of different types of foliage. This is a piece of rhododendron, and as you can see it's got this year's finished flower spike on it. If you gently pull that off, you'll end up with a rosette of leaves, and here's your new spike for next year. If you wanted to, you could spray that silver, add a little bit of glitter, and that looks very nice in the centre of your arrangements. It's a bit big, so cut it off a bit shorter and push it in. Any leaves that have got some bad bits in, you can just trim them up so that you get rid of any bits that have been eaten. That's the thing with leaves that you've got in from the garden. Quite often you'll find that the slugs and the mice and the other animals have had their fair share first. Use your variegated foliage if you have any. And you can even get some plastic holly with the berries already on there, which is quite good if you're actually short of your own. And when you put it in with other bits of fresh holly or other bits of fresh foliage, it looks very realistic. So you wire them the same as we did before, round the end. Don't need such a long piece of wire on these. And you can push these in as well as you go around. As you can see, it doesn't really look out of place with your fresh foliage. Just keep going round and round in a circle. Make sure you twist the ball as you go, otherwise you'll end up with one piece thicker or with one foliage more than the other. Add your bits of holly. Any pieces that you've actually cut off if you've done any of the other arrangements, you can add to this. It's just an odds and sods way of using up the bits of foliage. I'll just finish going round there. So you get a nice spherical shape. Don't forget the bottom. The bottom's very important, otherwise it will look totally an odd shape if you haven't got the bottom bit right. And you can see where the bottom is because you've got your plug to stop it falling off the top. Mind yourself on the holly because you'll get well prickled if you've got a good prickly bush. Make sure you push it in well. This is quite a good arrangement for hanging in a porch, say, or instead of having one on the door. Sometimes it's nice to have a change. Nice bit of yew to go in. Finish it off. Balance it up. A couple more bits of plastic berries. And of course you can add your plastic berries the same as you had for your wreath. And maybe some Christmas roses to go in. Or you could use your fresh carnations. But bear in mind, if you're going to hang it outside, you have to watch, obviously, that it doesn't freeze, otherwise the carnations will die off. Nice bit of berry for the top. We have some big plastic berries here, which are quite nice if you wanted to cut those off. You can wire these up. They've got a nice tassely bit there. So you could wire these up and put these in so they show up as a bunch. Or you could add the Christmas poinsettias either as a group like that, or if you wanted to, now that you can wire up, you can cut off 2 or 3, take off any bits of paper if you bought them from a garden centre and push them through. These are the kind of things that you can order on the mail sundries lists, which you'll find with the tape, so that you can start off with all the things to save you going out and trekking around trying to find them. That's the kind of thing you want. A little piece at the back here. It's more or less complete. If you enjoy doing this, then you might find that you'll actually enjoy looking at the other tapes that we've done, one of which is for weddings, and this is pomander is shown for a bridesmaid, done with flowers obviously, but it's the same technique as this one is. Just hold it up for you and you can see hopefully that it's circular and you've got your different colours and things in there, and that will look nice hanging in the porchway from maybe your centre light switch or something like that. If you wanted to, you could add your ribbons, your streamers and other Christmassy bits to it. Anything that you've got left over. Bits of tinsel, they look pretty in it as well. And you can get a bigger ball and make a larger one as well if you didn't want this size. I'd like to show you how to do some little cone hangers. These are quite neat for doing the Christmas tree with, or for hanging onto the looping that we've got behind us. It's really quite simple. It's the cones that you've picked up earlier in the year, and this one I've actually dipped in some bleach and boiled it for a few minutes so that the brown bits have turned a white silvery colour. They're quite simple, but you are going to need a glue gun. Put those there for the moment. So you take your cone and you tip it. You're going to be using the top side, and you can use all sorts of things. You buy a little pick, a Christmas pick, and you can use all these pieces from that, or another one with a fake looking capricious on the top, or you could use some of the glittered plastic leaves. They all look quite good once you've got them hanging on the tree, and some plastic berries. If you're going to use fresh things, you'll find that they won't stick, because once they've dried out a bit, they tend to fall off. Right, so we're going to cut one of these to pieces. Keep them on the little bit of plastic that they come on, because it keeps them in one place then. Take those off like that. Wire up a couple of berries ready. Cut them off short because you really only want the berry bit to show. In fact, you needn't really put them on an extra piece as long as you've twisted them well together for these. Take your cone, let's cut a little bit out of one of these for the elandai bit. Right, take your cone and you put a blob of glue on the top. And before it sets, which is quite quick, you want to just put into your bits of greenery in first, so that they're set on the top. And then you want to make a little ribbon handle, which is made from the non-stripping ribbon, because otherwise that will melt. So you have to take a piece that is non-stripping, whichever length you want. Make a little bow. This bow I'm going to make a cross because you want it to show on both sides of the cone. So we're going to bow it like a bootlace across that way and across again. Cut it off short, and to gather it in the middle you want a thinner wire, either a silver or a green one. Just wind it a couple of times around the middle so you have a flat bow. Cut it off short again. Right, and put a bit more glue into the middle and add the piece that you've got as a handle. So that it's nice and firm. You have to leave it a couple of minutes so it sets. You want to get it in the middle so that when you hang it, the cone is going to hang fairly level. The thing with the glue stick gun is that it tends to get streamers from it and they stick on everything. Then you slot your bow across. Like that, so you have a cone hanging. If you didn't want to put any more bits in, you could leave it at that. But if you want to add your berries, you carry on adding the little bit of glue and slotting the berries in as well then. Like that. And perhaps the poinsettia one at the top. If you want to, you could put the glue straight onto the back of the poinsettia bit, so that you know you've got the right bit glued, and just pop that into the middle. And there you have a little hanging cone which will go onto your Christmas tree or onto your Christmas swag for your fireplace. And you can do all sorts with those. You could use your little Father Christmases, you could use little silk bits of this, you could use Christmas roses, anything that you think will glue onto the top and not look too much over the top. These are the several ones we've done here. These have just got berries on here, and this one's got some little silk roses put into the top. If you wanted to go really adventurous, you could do a really big cone. With ones like this, you have to be a bit careful because they're very heavy once they're hung upside down. And they'll carry on opening as it's nice and warm in the room. But they give you some good scope for those. One of the things most people want to do for Christmas is the Christmas table decoration. And this one we're going to do is to be round. If you wanted to do the long table arrangement, I've actually done that in the other tape that we've done, which is for special occasions. This is going to be the round one, so we need to actually carry on round the edge of the dish here so that we cover it all in. This is a nice piece of yew. This dish actually comes in one unit. The Oasis and the dish have been put together, so you haven't got to go and buy one block and one dish. You need to cut your different types of foliage. Bits of ivy, bits of yew, bits of variegated foliage if you've got any, because it gives you a nice change of colouring. Before you get too far into the arrangement, you want to put your candle holder in, and it goes in the centre. And in the bottom of here I've put a piece of the tape and the sticky stuff to keep it upright, the candle, otherwise sometimes it tends to fall out. Get that in nice and firmly. And then you carry on round the edge with your different leaves. This is a Mahonia leaf, which at this time of year has nice dark red colouring. Make sure you cut your stems on a slant because they're woody and they need to take in as much water as they can. When you actually cut your foliage from the garden, or if you've bought it in, you need to soak it for a good long while in a bucket of warm water to start off with, so that they get the pores open for them to absorb the water. It's quite important to do this bit of preparation beforehand. It makes them last a lot longer once you've got them in your warm house atmosphere. Carry on round the edge till you've got most of the edge covered, using the different textures if you've got them to hand. Add a few little bows if you want to. And a few berries if you have any of those on nice branches. And if you want to use your flowers, put those in next. These are carnations that are very dominant, so we're going to put these showing nicely further down than the spray carnations I'm going to add in a minute. Trouble is with flower arranging, if you're a person that has very good nails, it's one of the things you're going to find suffers a bit because they get very dirty very quickly, especially if you do planting bowls and that kind of thing, and they start to split. Don't think you find many florists with long nails nowadays. Try and keep the ribbons away from the centre, because if you actually light your candle, you don't want anything combustible that's near to the middle here. If you want to add a bit of gypsophila, you can add that as well. It's always supposed to be superstitiously unlucky to have red and white together. And you won't find many florists putting red and white except for the special occasions like at Christmas or for Valentine's. I think it's supposed to represent blood and bandages, probably something that started in the war. If you keep turning it round, you'll find you won't tend to get an arrangement which is one-sided, which is quite easy to do because you get carried away putting the things in on one side and totally forget that you need to put things in on the other. A few of the false berries, a little bit of the ordinary fresh holly berries. And if you want to add any cones, you can just push these in that you've already wired up earlier. You can put them into groups of 3 is quite a good number. Or you could add a little Father Christmas or a snowman. Usually you only put one of one thing, but if you wanted to go over the top, you could perhaps add a robin. Put it facing that direction. Or other things that you could add. If you've got some tinsel that's over from the Christmas tree, then you could loop that together as you do the ribbons. Make 2 or 3 groups. This is very good for using up old bits of tinsel And you can just group them together. 3 is a good number again. Just wire them up and pop them in. And it gives a nice bit of sparkle to your arrangement. Of course, there's no need to actually put flowers in at all if you didn't want to. You could just do it all with the foliage. Put those in that side. Take that out. And you could also use the bigger false berries if you wanted to. These come on sprays like this. You can spread out the leaves underneath, twisting them the right way. And add them to a wire, a thicker one really, because otherwise it won't hold up. Add those in there. So it's quite a good arrangement for using up any little bits that you have left over, perhaps from doing the Christmas tree. And it's quite a popular thing with children as well, if you've got little ornaments in it that they can look at while they're eating their dinner. Just put a bit in the middle. You can't see it, but you can see I've got a good gap in the middle here. That's where the candle is, so when it's lit you have to watch that it's not going to catch light with anything. There you go. One robin, one little snowman, and of course you could add any other bits that you've got. Of course, one of the things that you could also add to the arrangement is the little bottles of seasonal mead, which looks quite nice hidden between the foliage for your guests that are going to come for Christmas dinner. This is going to be a table arrangement but done onto a wooden base. First of all, you're going to need your dish and a piece of oasis, which you need to tape firmly to your green dish. You could use a saucer if you hadn't got a green dish. It's just as good. Attach it to the end of the wood like this, and we're going to use some nice big branches here because we want to hang some of the hanging things from it. So if you take a big piece, this is a piece of rhododendron, and push it well into the back like this. Sometimes it has a tendency to swing round. Right, it's a bit of a balancing trick, this. And then we're going to bring a nice piece across the bottom of the wood. It also helps to stabilise this big lump at the back of here. And you can add your foliage as much as you want or as little as you want, provided that you've covered your dish. Some nice variegated ivy leaf or leaves to fill in the middle there. If you wanted to, you could add some sprayed foliage with your silver spray paint and your glitter to this one. I'm going to add a little bit of the looped up tinsel just to give a little bit of base at the bottom there. And a nice spray of the berries to come out along the bottom branch. I'm also going to use some plastic or silk poinsettias. The poinsettia itself is quite a difficult plant to keep, but these silk ones are very realistic, and you can keep them for use year after year. Usually you only want 3 because that's a better number. So really you don't need very many things to complete this arrangement. And what you can do then is to use it as a miniature Christmas tree, finding a branch where the things aren't going to collide with anything underneath them. You can add your Christmas baubles, your cones, whatever you like to the top. Make sure there isn't a gap at the bottom here. I always find these difficult to unravel on the bit of cord that they give you. That's it. So you can use bells or baubles, bits of ribbon, bits of tinsel, again using whatever you've got to hand from your normal Christmas arrangements. There, doesn't take long, and it's quite a nice table centre. This is a really quick table centre. All you need is a block of wood with a hole drilled in the middle, and which is the right size for your candle, and a cheap and cheerful candle base. What you need to do is to just pour in here a little bit of your glue, hot glue. Put your candle in and hold it while it sets for a minute. Pop over the top, and you have a neat little table centre. Quick and easy. This is going to be a textured base. It's quite a modern way of doing flowers. It's also very economical, and it's quite fun to do. This is a posy pad. It's a piece of foam that's been attached to a plastic base so that it doesn't get your table wet. And you could either go around the edge with foliage, as we did in the first table arrangement, or you could use some ribbons. This is the stripping ribbon, which comes in this width, and I've stapled it together to form a pleat. I haven't quite finished it, and I'm going to show you how to do this. It's my personal pet hate doing this particular thing, and I can't say I'm the best person to do it, but I'll give it a good try. This is called box pleating. As you can see, it goes in the form of a box. So what you do is you loop the ribbon over backwards, and you staple it at the top. Forms one side of the box, and it goes backwards on itself on that side. The trick is to get it exactly the same size for each box you do. I always seem to get it bigger as I go along. Another one. Fold it, staple it, fold it. Keep it dead level at the top, otherwise it goes off on a kink. And staple it. Fold it, staple it, back on itself, and staple it. If you wanted to do a different type, you could do ordinary pleating, which I find a lot easier, and it's just literally one pleat, staple, one pleat and staple, and so on until you've got the right length. So you get a long piece of ribbon all folded neatly like that. Right, we only need the piece to go around here. So you fix it on by either pinning it on with these long pins like this, straight in between each fold, or you could cut a piece of wire up and make your little hair clip like that. That will push in here as well. Or you could get the proper pins, which are called German pins, which have actually got this dent in it, and they're nice and sharp and they go on quite easily. If you pop those in, I'm using the pins because it's quicker. If you've got small children that are likely to demolish something like this, then I advise you just use the wires, which won't harm them. All the way around till you get to the bit at the back where you can cast it off, and just make sure it's neatly pinned with the end of the bit like that. Right, so that's covering your base for you. And now we're going to put in different foliages to make what we call a textured base. You need to keep turning it and putting foliage in groups or lines, or find unusual pieces of twigs or stones from the garden. This is a nice piece of rockery stone I found with some moss already growing on it. So I'm going to push this in on one side. This is a circular arrangement for the centre of a table, so you want nice lots of interesting things for people to look at on all sides. So you can build up a design from that. It's a bit like doing a collage but on a flat base. Have a piece of moss on the front of there. It's not unsimilar to doing one of the gardens that you used to do when you were children. Put a couple of pins just to hold the moss down. Push those right in. Piece of rosemary at the side perhaps, or a piece of broom. Broom's nice because it has this sort of wild look and spindly. This also looks good if you've bothered to silver it. Nice little group of ivy leaves. Just putting some bits of foliage at the back here as a group, which I'll show you in a minute. I've done it. And you can have maybe a hebe tree in front of there. And perhaps another one to balance it on the other side. This is going to be a group perhaps. This is a curry plant, which has a rather strong aromatic smell of curry. The rosemary is very pretty. It's also a herb, and it's one of the things people like for weddings, as it's for remembrance. Bit of yew at the front. Perhaps a different texture, a piece of the variegated laurel. And you can carry on building up your different pieces in it like that. And just use it maybe as a green arrangement, or you could add a little group of berries. Like this. Oops, one's fallen off. And you could add your flowers if you want to. Make a run of the flowers. This is a spray chrysanthemum, which just the head that I've cut off. It's quite useful for using up any damaged ones with a short stem. Pushing them right in, because this side is going to be seen by somebody sitting this side of it. You could use perhaps a piece of willow herb that you've sprayed. This looks nice sprayed and glittered. Put it in the middle between my bit of broom. Or you could try spraying some bracken pieces. it looks quite effective. Just to give you a different texture. The bracken's been picked in the autumn and just dried naturally, hung upside down, therefore it's all kinky bits, rather than being flat underneath a carpet, which is the usual way to dry bracken. And perhaps a few cones in the middle. You don't have to wire these up on these ones because you're not going to tip it upside down. So the cones could actually just sit onto the top if you wanted them to. You could perhaps add a robin sitting. Or if you wanted to go to some expense and you love the lilies, you could put perhaps a little group of these Madonna lilies, which have got a lovely way of standing up on their own in quite a regal fashion. You can push it through the moss, which is quite useful. Take some of the bad leaves, or sometimes they come with leaves that are slightly bent, so it's best to take those off. I'm making a nice show at the back here for the person that's sitting on this side of it. And I've got one more little gap in the middle at the front of here, perhaps a bit of gypsophila in there, and perhaps some broken heads of sprayed carnations you could use right in deep to give a nice central point, coming up through the foliage and in between the cones. This type of arrangement can last for months. You can just take out a piece of the foliage that's died and substitute a new piece. That way you can keep it going. It's a good present for somebody who's keen on flower arranging, because you can add all your personal pieces to it, little bits of things that might mean something to somebody that you're giving it to. Little cone to hold the gap in the middle. Right, and there you have what's known now as a textured base. So you've got little bits of interest all the way around. There you go. I think you'll have fun doing that. If you wanted to add some other things to it, then if you're going out in the autumn on a walk, then pick up some beech nuts and spray these and put a wire through them, or some just ordinary bits of oak twig, just sprayed silver, and these look quite effective when they're just pushed into the oasis, very much on the vein of a Japanese arrangement. It gives you just a different aspect. Just push them in, and people will wonder what they are because they don't look anything when they're on the ground or on the tree, but when they're sprayed or glittered into the middle, they're quite effective. If they're too big at the bottom, then just cut a piece off so that it's on a slant so it goes in easily. This is another fun base that you can do with your other bits that you've got left over. This is some slightly old tinsel, and we've taken some of the thin green coated wires and just one stem of the gold and silvered poinsettia, the silk ones, and we're going to make a pyramid with these. So what we're going to do is take the tinsel and make a little prong with your wire, and literally staple it all the way around the cone. It takes a bit of time. You zip around, keeping it level in the runs as you go round. This is a dry cone. You can hear it, it's making a good squeaking noise as it goes in. There's a wet cone or a wet block that you could use if you wanted to use fresh foliage in it. The dried ones are always this browny colour. One tip with this is if you're using it, don't wipe your eyes with your fingers, because all these little bits of dust that come off here stick on your fingers and it comes off in your eyes if you're not careful, and it makes them itch like mad. So literally keep going round and round the cone until you've got it covered. Seem to have got a big join there. Cut some more wires. Always amazes me how much this actually takes. Well, I've just got to the top of the cone, and then we're going to add the bits to this. We're going to cut the poinsettia here up, a little bit of stem left so we can put a wire around it. You could use the red one or the silver one if you wanted to. If you use gold tinsel, then it's quite nice to have the silver as a contrast. Wire them up by just holding onto the head and twisting the wire from the bottom. If you're neat, you might be able to get away with using half a wire on one and half on the other, because you don't actually want the length of wire to be able to push into the cone. Wire up a few berries. You can get the berries in 3 different colours. You can get them in the silver, the gold and the red. And we want a little Father Christmas for the top, or the snowman would do, or maybe a small robin. Right, so when you've got your bits together, you just push them into your cone at irregular intervals so it looks like they're growing from the tinsel. This is a nice little table centre to use, and you can keep it from year to year. You can make any pattern that you want. You can make a spiral, especially if they're not all in a dead line. One up near the top, and then you can put as a crowning glory on the top. Oops, don't let go. Hold on to your ring, sir. One onto the top. One Father Christmas atop his pyramid. This is going to be a Christmas cracker, but with a difference. What I've done is I've taken an ordinary Christmas cracker and cut it in half and taken out the contents. I've covered a piece of cardboard with a piece of wrapping paper, and I mean a piece of cornflake packet or anything that's reasonably thick cardboard will be fine. And you need a dish and a round piece of foam and your greenery and the bits that you want to put into it, and the glue gun. What we need to do first is to put the foam into your dish and push it in well. If you wanted to, you could secure it if you feel that it might fall out. Personally, I find that they're pretty good at staying in these small dishes. And we're going to glue gun the cracker to the bottom of this, so that we're ending up with a cracker that looks like it's been pulled and the contents are spilled out. So we want to glue gun the base to the card so that it doesn't move, roughly in the centre, and we're going to put a piece of glue on the back of that piece of cracker at that end, push it right up to the dish. I've just tied it off with a bow and streamered it on at the end because this one wasn't a particularly good one, it had come apart a bit. You could use last year's crackers up this way if you wanted to, like that. Make sure that it's firmly on the base at the bottom, so that you end up with your cardboard and your cracker with a gap in the middle. Right, so we need your foliage, just to go around your dish. You don't particularly want your dish showing too much, which is the same for all arrangements really. It's handy, that drapes over the top. Some nice pieces of holly. I'm going to try and keep this arrangement fairly small because otherwise you tend to lose your cracker at the end if you're not careful. It's quite a nice one to do with your dried or silk stuff, if you have any, because you can keep it then from year to year and just pull it out and use it as your table centre. Some of the nice berries. If you cut in between the joints on your Leylandii, you can get two pieces out of one quite easily. And cut the mahogany the same way. Anything which has got bracts like that, you can just cut in between. One's a bit damaged at the end, we'll take that one off. Nice bit of the grey curry. And if you wanted to, you could add some little pieces of the plastic variegated holly because it doesn't show too badly in this kind of arrangement as being totally different. Some of the berries. And perhaps some of the silk poinsettias, which are nice and bright. If you wanted to, you could add some of the plastic Christmas roses because they're very effective and they're very realistic. If you do 3 together, it makes a nice point. And you could perhaps put some ribbons in, some streamers, if you wanted to. Cut your ribbon up and put it together and then just put a wire around the top to catch it. You can do these different lengths so you get different lengths on your curl then. Take your scissors and just run them down it like that. You need to weave it between the foliage and down onto your table. You could use green if you wanted to. This is a nice Christmassy colour. Don't get it too thick because it's quite a dominant colour if it's too thick. And you could have your Father Christmas still hanging on to his little crown like that. And if you wanted to, you could add a few fresh carnations just to finish it off if you wanted to. These you'd obviously have to take out if you were doing it to save for next year, all the fresh stuff. But the silk stuff you obviously can keep, pack it away and make sure the mice don't get in because they're quite partial to the round plastic bits. Make sure you try and do both sides the same so that the people on the other side on the table don't get left out. Nice little cracker as a different alternative table arrangement. This is a Christmas card, and I've already put the ribbon on the top. It's one of the flat bows that I showed you earlier, and we have a piece of Oasis fixed in here on a little cage. You can get them with a dish in the bottom of here, but I haven't got one for this particular one. You could also use an ordinary Christmas card that somebody sent you, an upright one, and just glue it or tape it at the bottom here open so that you can just cut a piece in the middle and put your flowers through there. That's quite a good idea. Right, we're going to use the back of here, a piece of greenery. This is quite an economical arrangement. You don't need that many things for it. You can bring it out through the front by pushing up into the Oasis like that. This is the Mahonia leaf we're cutting up again, like that. And it's better to put in the things that you want to put in at the front first, otherwise you tend to get it a bit crowded if you're not careful. So we'll have our robin in like that, looking out, and then you can put some more bits of foliage, or say some poinsettias above him, coming round. One at the front he looks like he's going to be sitting on, and a few spray carnations. You have to fill the side in it as well, because people obviously are going to see through this gap here. To hold it with one hand, otherwise a card gets pushed across your tabletop. Put a tartan ribbon in if you'd like. It's nice if you're Scottish to keep up the tradition. Perhaps you could have a little trailing ribbon coming from underneath there to go around the side. This card could be used as a silver wedding anniversary card as well, if you wanted to. Sometimes it's a bit of a job to find the Oasis when you can't see it. Nice bright berry to see from my side. A bit of gypsophila coming through in front. And if you wanted to, you could use some of the nice September flower, because it has a nice point at the top, and it's quite useful around Christmas time because it has a nice frond. Like that, and perhaps one coming out in front of the robin. One Christmas card, quite a nice original gift if you want to send somebody a card. This little Father Christmas is one of a range of different Christmas ornaments that are done now for Christmas flower arranging. I've shaved a piece of Oasis ready more or less to go in here. You have to mark it so that it goes in quite neatly and is going to be held in there, because you can't get your pop tape on these china ornaments very well. And then we're going to just put in a few bits of greenery, a few cones and some spray carnations. It won't really take an awful lot more than that. This is quite neat for doing onto a windowsill or a sideboard, or maybe a child's bedroom if they don't mind flowers too much. Don't forget, if you're using this yew, that is in fact poisonous, the berries are, so if you've got any with any berries on, then keep them out of reach of the children. And don't forget that a lot of these flowers and plants that are brought indoors and the sprays need spraying with the water, because otherwise they dry out. In fact, your Christmas tree tends to dry out because of it's not getting the natural water and things on the branches. Oops, got hooked up in my berry. That's it. You have to keep it away from Santa's head, otherwise he disappears into the foliage. Bringing a line through the middle here. This again is another arrangement which is quite useful for using up any broken heads. Just turn the wrong way. Better. And any little bits of oasis that you might have cut off from a larger arrangement. The cones you want to put into a bag and keep for another year. Make sure they're quite dry and you haven't been spraying them before you pack them away. Otherwise you might come back to a rotted mess. It's nearly finished. One more at the bottom here because I've got the September flower hanging out down here. And if you wanted to, you could add your beech cones to that, your beech masts, the silvered ones, or you could leave them natural. And Father Christmas. The last thing on this tape that I'm going to do is a potted fleur. This is an arrangement with flowers, greenery and potted plants. You'll need a planting bowl, this is the middle size, and some potting compost, and obviously plants, greenery and a piece of oasis. I've started off by putting some soil in the bottom of the bowl. This is quite dry, so when it's actually done you'll need to water it quite well because this will absorb the water back from the plants. So we're going to take our plants and put them into the bowl first. This is an azalea. It comes always generally in a earthenware pot, which you need to push the root base out from the bottom, because it's usually quite pot bound. And you put this slightly on the skew in your bowl and make sure that you push your soil around the bottom of it. Azaleas are very thirsty plants, and you'll need, if you're keeping it in its pot as a pot plant, you'll need to water it almost every day because it absorbs all the water out of the pot itself. A drop of warm tea every day is a good thing for it. This is a primrose. These are in really until Mothering Sunday, and you can always plant this out in the garden. Again, make sure you push your soil round it and into the triangular bit between the two round pieces of root at the bottom here. Then we have a little Christmas tree. And if you're not going to have a big Christmas tree in your room, this is quite a nice way of actually celebrating Christmas with a little tree. And again, you can plant this outside when you finish with the bowl. It's been sprayed, so it's nice silver colour. I know this looks quite an odd shape, but we're going to put into the back of here a block of Oasis, and I'm going to cover the bottom with a piece of polythene. This is just an old plastic bag that I've cut up, and I'm going to pin this onto the bottom of the Oasis like this, pushing the pin through so that we get a watertight bottom to it. This is quite necessary, otherwise all the water that you put into your piece of foam is going to go straight into the plants that don't necessarily want it. You could bring it up halfway if you wanted to. Then you put this in at the back or between the plants, and it's wedged in here between them, and then you put in your bits of foliage which makes up almost like a big green plant in the back here. I've also brought poinsettia, because poinsettias are the Christmas plants, but they are extremely tricky to keep. This is a good example. This one has, as you can see, looking a bit worse for wear. And I brought it because a lot of people suffer from this problem. The leaves drop off or wither, or they go yellow, or the top just withers away. This is in actual fact a leaf brax. This isn't the flower. The flower's the piece right in the centre. But you could take this out and use it in the back of your arrangement, because you're going to put your flowers in front of it, and it will hide the bits that don't look very good. Or alternatively, you can cut off the branch. This branch was looking really sick, it was all wilted, and I cut it off and put it into a milk bottle with some water in it. This on the top is where it's been knocked or it's been caught in a draught. They don't like to be in a draught. They like a nice warm position with a lot of light. And if you bought it from a market and it's done this kind of thing, or the leaves have gone yellow, then the chances are that it's caught a draught or a cold en route to your house. I mean, even walking across the road with an unprotected plant, it will catch a cold quickly. Mind you, some people are brilliant and they can keep them from year to year. If you take off the damaged brax, it does help. It does give off a milky solution from here. Some people are allergic to this. I come out in a rash and it makes me itch. But if you hold a candle flame or a match to this, it'll stop it from dripping. But it lasts a long time in water, so if you cut this bract off and put it into the Oasis, that way you can use it and it's not going to go to waste. Turn that one round there. Right. Then we're going to fill in the back. We've got a piece of ruscus branch here, which is nice and tall. The thing with planted bowls is to give it different heights, and you can always change your foliage when it's starting to look a bit dried out or sick. Holly branches are nice in here, or you could use some cotoneaster berries. These are usually quite full just before Christmas if you've managed to get them before the birds do, and they make nice additions to your planted bowls or to your arrangements. They're a bit heavy, so you need to pick up the branches that haven't got too many berries on them, or they're actually bending in the right direction. This cotoneaster is a very good tree to plant if you want to use it for flower arranging, because it grows quickly and it is a mass of red berries in the autumn and early part of the winter. And also it's good because the birds have got a feeding point for it, getting their food for winter. As you can see, it doesn't actually take an awful lot, and you could hang your baubles and things from it as well if you wanted to, by making it look Japanesey. I think it's quite a good way of A, filling up a bowl, and B, using up any plants that you've got. This is a silk one, so we'll pop that in there. Again, you can use these from year to year just to fill in any gaps and make it nice and bright. And if you're going to use it as a table centre, then obviously you're going to have to make it all the way around. So we're just going to put a few in at the back here. Fills in the top of the foam so nobody can see that you've actually done an arrangement in with your plants. Don't throw the pots away because they're very useful for planting things out for the summer. And then if you wanted to, you could either add, say, a teddy bear to it or a big bow, or you could add your sugared almond favours. We do these actually complete, so if you wanted to order sugared almond favours of any type, then we do them and we send them already done. But he could sit in here amongst the foliage like that, and then the children can come and take him full of sweets or sugared almonds when Christmas is finished. There you go. Put the little teddy down at the front there. If you're going to use him in it, then you need to put a little bit of polythene under him so he doesn't get damaged with the soil.
I would like to show you now how to make this Christmas bonbonniere. Now, starting from scratch, we need 3 discs. Very simple, just starting off with 3. Now this one we've already made is made with sugared almonds. Now, so the children don't get left out with things like this on the table at Christmas, we're going to make one now using sweeties for the children. So you just take a handful of these. We don't have to count them out into just 5. Take on like so, centre those, and we take a length of ribbon, which we cut off. And we tie this round. Now we put one little knot to start with, because for the children's one we're going to put something a little bit different to a poinsettia in it. We're going to take this little Father Christmas, okay? Well, he's not so little actually, but we want to see him, how the children do when they're sitting down at the table. So we tie him in the middle, like so. Looks rather splendid sitting there, doesn't he? Then we take the scissors, stand him on his head for a minute, make our little loops like so with that, and then we take another ring, our circlet of net. Again we have to centre him, Father Christmas and all, into the middle. And with another, this time we'll change the colour and use green. Take a length of green. Again, a good guide is from your fingers to the top of your arm for a decent length. Find the centre. Tightly, like so. And you must remember to double knot it because the nets wouldn't hold otherwise. It's become loose with handling. Again, you have to sort of make him even around the Father Christmas like so. Again, Barbara's method of using the scissors. And now the third net. Now before we pick that up, it's much better to get your 2 lengths of ribbon ready. Now then, take him into the middle, like so. All the way round. and then we tie them. I think this Father Christmas had enough standing on his head. There we are, all done and dusted. Let's just make him look attractive with everything around him. And finally, we do the stripping. There we go. And there he is, pert little chap, isn't he, sitting in there. Now if you take the wine glass again, very useful things, wine glasses. There you go. And there he is. For the little child, or again, for the ladies in the house. Now we mustn't forget the gentlemen. Now they can have a miniature bottle of mead, which you can see here. Right, and you can have the names printed on the back of the gentleman if you wish, and they come to sit on the table in this rather nice sack. So there you would have the complete family. For the gentleman, his nice miniature bottle of mead, for the lady, her bonbonniere, and for the little girl or little boy, a rather nice Father Christmas one. Complete family, really. Instead of a Father Christmas one, if you got to the Easter time, you could then have perhaps for the children a nice little chicken one like this. And again, instead of putting almonds inside, you would put in sweeties. Then there is no danger to the child at all. Again, as you can see, or for the ladies, just with the almonds, the same idea. And of course then for the gentleman, if you wanted, you could use the celebration mead. Same way, put into a little sack and place on the table. Or again, if you have any other anniversaries in the year, you could do perhaps for your parents a silver wedding, or your grandparents a golden wedding, or a ruby wedding. Again, the same ideas, basically using the nets and the ribbons. Like so, or perhaps for the golden wedding. And there you would complete all your celebrations. Now to complete the bonbonniere, we have the gift cards, which you can see here. Now whatever the event, we have the appropriate gift card to go with it, with the names of whether it be the bride and groom, or the anniversary, or a christening, whatever the event, we can supply the card with the names and the date of whatever the anniversary is. And the same applies with the bottles of mead. On the reverse side, we have the names printed on and the date.
Well, here I am again, and I hope you've enjoyed looking at the tape, and perhaps you found something that you fancy doing. All I can say is really enjoy doing the things that you want to do, and then you'll find that the things go really well, and all your friends will be amazed at the arrangements that you can turn out. So all I need to say now is Happy Christmas, Happy New Year, cheers to you all.